Welcome back. Today's story starts on a golden Arizona evening, the kind that bathes everything in amber and makes even the sharp edges of life feel momentarily soft. The air is dry, humming with the faint buzz of cicadas and the distant echo of a lawnmower. Sidewalks glow beneath the sun's retreat, and rows of pastel-colored homes in Crestwood Bluffs stand too still, like stage props waiting for the scene to begin. But this isn't peace. Not really. It's the tight-lipped quiet before something ruptures. Through this suburban stillness walks Tobias Cross, tall, composed, a silhouette carved from something harder than the world around him. His gait is deliberate, almost military, his right hand gripping a leash that swings loosely by his side. At the other end, Ranger, his Belgian Malinois, patrols the path with instinctive precision, ears flicking, head low, every movement smooth like oil. You'd never guess Tobias once led black ops across enemy lines, or that he carries scars the world can't see. He's been back stateside 6 months, trying to disappear into routine, morning jogs, strong coffee, silence. But this neighborhood never quite embraced him. Curtains twitch when he walks by. Cars slow, then speed up. The suspicion doesn't shout, it whispers, and Tobias hears every word. Still, he walks. Because walking means control. Walking means Ranger is beside him, tethered to something good. Until tonight. Until the wrong patrol car slows to a stop. Until the door opens and 2 local officers step out, smirking like they already know how this story ends. But they don't. Not yet. They see a black man in a nice neighborhood with a big dog and a quiet face. They see something to challenge, something to contain. What they don't see, what they couldn't possibly understand, is that Tobias Cross isn't just another face. He's the last person you corner. And when that leash goes slack, when the trigger is pulled, they will wake something they cannot put back in the cage. Keep watching, because justice isn't coming through the front door. It's already here, and it's walking on 2 legs. The sun dipped lower behind the red rock hills of Crestwood Bluffs, throwing long shadows across the tidy cul-de-sacs and the perfectly trimmed hedges that lined the quiet streets. Inside one of those identical stucco houses, Tobias Cross moved with the silent precision of a man who had learned long ago that noise attracts danger. He stood barefoot in the kitchen, one hand wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, the other absent-mindedly stroking Ranger's head as the dog sat at attention, eyes fixed on the front door. A faint breeze stirred the linen curtains. The air inside the house was still, too still, the kind of stillness Tobias didn't trust, not after the life he'd lived. 10 years in Delta Force had carved discipline into his bones. It had taught him how to read the air like a language. And right now, the air whispered that something was off. The neighborhood saw him as an outsider, a stranger with too many muscles and too few words. His house was immaculate, his lawn always trimmed, but his presence set something twitching beneath the surface of this polished suburbia. He'd tried, really tried, to blend in. He smiled at the neighbors, waved to the mailman, even joined the HOA's monthly barbecue once. But none of it changed the way their eyes lingered. None of it erased the subtle edge in their voices, the suspicion behind their politeness. Tobias didn't need their approval. He just wanted peace. For Ranger. For himself. But peace is a fragile thing. Every morning, Tobias woke before dawn, ran 5 miles with Ranger at his side, then returned to drink coffee and pretend the past didn't exist. But it always did. In the creak of the floorboards, in the feel of the Glock under his bed, in the way he always sat with his back to the wall. It was in his muscles, in his breath, in the way he mapped every room the second he stepped into it. You don't come back from war the same. You adapt or you break. And Tobias didn't break. He'd saved lives in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. Killed men whose names were buried in redacted files. But none of that mattered here. Here, he was just the black guy with the military tattoos and a dog that looked like it belonged to a SWAT team. Nobody asked about his service. Nobody cared. And that was fine until now. Until 2 officers with inflated egos and zero instincts pulled into his street and mistook his calm for submission. Tobias didn't know their names yet, but he would. Because the moment they stepped out of that cruiser and laid eyes on Ranger with that smirk, the moment their tone shifted from polite to patronizing, he knew. This wasn't a patrol, this was a test, and they were about to fail it in a way that would change everything. Tobias saw the patrol car the moment it turned onto the block. Slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. The cruiser's tires whispered against the asphalt, its black and white frame cutting stark against the golden hour light. Ranger's ears perked. Tobias didn't break stride. He kept his eyes forward, pace steady, leash loose. But in his gut, a switch flipped. It wasn't intuition, it was muscle memory. The same flicker of warning that had saved his life in Kandahar, in Mogadishu, in all the places the US government pretended didn't exist. The cruiser crept closer, matching his walk like a shadow. Windows down. 2 officers, mid-40s, stocky builds. One had a face that looked like it had been carved from arrogance. The other kept tapping something on his belt, nervous energy masked as confidence. Tobias didn't stop walking until the inevitable came. "Evening," the driver called out, voice smooth but sharp, like the edge of a blade just before it cuts. Tobias turned slowly, calm, neutral, a man used to being watched. "Evening," he replied, his voice low, even, no challenge. "Not yet." "You live around here?" The question landed with the weight of a loaded gun. Tobias offered the same answer he'd given the last time someone asked. "Yes, 47 Brookstone Drive." No stammer, no hesitation, but something shifted in their eyes, just enough to catch. The officer behind the wheel smirked, leaned out further. "Funny, don't remember seeing you around." Tobias held his gaze. "I travel for work, private security." The word hung in the air, and he saw the flicker of something sour cross the second cop's face. "Contractor, huh? That code for mercenary?" Tobias smiled politely. "That code for neighbor?" They didn't like that. He saw it in the subtle way they shifted, the sideways glance they exchanged. Then came the next move. "We had a call about someone suspicious in the neighborhood," the driver said, tone casual. Too casual. "Figure it's probably nothing, but you know how it is. Gotta check it out." Tobias felt the tension start to rise, a silent current pulsing beneath the surface. "Walking my dog is suspicious now?" he asked, still even, still controlled. "You'd be surprised," the cop said, eyes flicking to Ranger. "That's a big dog. Trained. Very. Trained for what?" The question wasn't innocent. Tobias didn't answer right away. Let the weight settle. "Obedience. Protection. He doesn't move unless I tell him to." That was when the second cop stepped out of the car, slow, deliberate, boots crunching on pavement. He flanked Tobias close enough to intimidate, far enough to claim it wasn't. "We're gonna need to see some ID," the first said. Not a request, a command wrapped in a smile. Tobias moved carefully, hand going to his wallet. Ranger shifted, tense but still. The leash trembled slightly. "Easy, boy," Tobias murmured, but the energy had changed. The ground was tilting, and for the first time Tobias wasn't sure which direction it would fall. The ID was already in Tobias's hand when he noticed it. The twitch in the officer's eye. The way his partner's hand hovered a beat too long near his belt. Not protocol, not casual, something else, something off. Tobias had seen that look before, not in neighborhoods like this, but in hostile checkpoints under foreign suns, right before chaos erupted. He held out the card, steady, deliberate, eyes never leaving theirs. The first officer barely glanced at it before smirking, then handed it to his partner without a word. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It buzzed. Ranger's posture shifted just slightly, not tense yet, but alert. Reading the air, just like Tobias had trained him to do. "You were Delta," the second cop muttered, flipping the ID over like he might find a reason to dismiss what was already obvious. "Retired," Tobias corrected, calm, measured. "Now I consult." He saw it then, how both officers stiffened just enough to betray that they weren't reacting to him. They were reacting to something else, something they already knew. The first cop chuckled, too forced. "What's a guy like you doing in this neighborhood? Don't you people usually live behind gates?" "Bought this house 5 years ago," Tobias replied. "Like the piece. You sure? The question landed like a brick through glass. That wasn't curiosity, that was doubt, challenge, and beneath it the chill of something uglier. Tobias felt the cold creep up his spine, not from fear but clarity. He thought it was random, a mistake. Maybe a pair of overzealous patrolmen looking to flex muscle on someone they assumed was powerless. But no, this wasn't random. This was curated. The second officer stepped in closer, breathing distance now. You think being some special forces tough guy makes you untouchable? Tobias didn't flinch. Number. But it means I know how to read a threat. The partner chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You got all the answers, huh? Then he said it, soft under his breath, but Tobias caught every syllable. Should have just stayed overseas. And there it was. Not suspicion, not misunderstanding, malice, intent. Tobias didn't speak. His breathing slowed, his gaze sharpened, everything narrowed. Every word they'd said, every move they'd made, none of it had been about safety. It was about sending a message. The same message sent to countless others who didn't fit into their neighborhoods. Only this time, they'd picked the wrong target. The officer leaned in, whispering, "Just walk your dog somewhere else next time." Tobias looked down at Ranger, loyal, unmoving, silent as ever, and realized it wasn't about the walk. It was about erasure. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I live here," he said quietly. But in his mind, another voice rose. Clear, steady, forged in fire. They're not here to protect anyone. They're here to provoke. And Tobias Hayes, Delta Force legend, had just realized he wasn't dealing with cops. He was dealing with predators. The slap of paper against his front door wasn't loud, but it thundered in Tobias's ears. A white envelope. No return address, no markings. Just weight. The kind of weight you don't feel in your hands, but in your gut. He crouched, picked it up, and felt it immediately. Several pages inside, thick, crisp, printed with purpose. He opened it slowly, the paper slicing through the air like a blade. Inside, a printed email chain, police department letterhead, time-stamped surveillance stills, internal memos. One image froze him, a street cam still, grainy but clear enough. Him walking Ranger, two silhouettes in the golden light, and behind them, the unmistakable shape of the cruiser. The timestamp. 2 hours before the officers had claimed to receive any call. Beneath it, a memo. He fits the profile. Push him. See how far. Signed by someone in their department, a supervisor. Tobias's breath caught. His fingers trembled for the first time since Kandahar. It hadn't been a random stop. Not a mistake. It was a setup. Targeted. Approved. He staggered back, heart hammering in his chest, every detail now snapping into sharp focus. The way they'd approached, the calculated questions, the deliberate pressure. Ranger let out a low growl, sensing the shift in his handler's energy. Tobias dropped into a crouch, the paper falling from his hand. "They planned it," he whispered, the words dry in his throat. "They were going to kill me." His voice cracked on the last word, and in the silence that followed, the house itself felt like it was holding its breath. Then he noticed the last page, a photo, not of him, of Ranger, bloodied, motionless, lying on the pavement, time-stamped with military precision. Beneath it, scribbled in pen, "Control your mutt next time." The world tilted, a sharp, brutal lurch in his chest. He didn't scream, he didn't move, just stared. The memory of the shot, the way Ranger stumbled, the feel of his weight collapsing against Tobias's chest, rushed back, unbearable and raw. And now this, confirmation. Not just that it had happened, but that it was meant to. He rose slowly, grabbing the envelope, moving to his desk with mechanical calm. He opened his laptop, inserted the flash drive tucked into the envelope's corner. A video began to play, body cam footage, but not theirs. His, hidden, synced. He watched it unfold, the taunts, the threats, the exact moment Miller drew first, and the exact moment Tobias didn't. It was all there. Proof. But this wasn't justice. It wasn't even closure. It was an invitation. And the last frame, The final insult flickered on screen. Miller laughing, standing over Ranger's body. Calloway muttering off-cam, "One less problem." Tobias didn't blink, didn't breathe. And then, as if pulled by gravity, he whispered, "You're not getting away with this." His hand curled into a fist. This wasn't vengeance, it was war. Redemption rarely comes without a cost. And on that rain-soaked evening, Tobias Cross stood before the shattered remnants of his former life. A man defined by scars both seen and unseen. The courthouse steps shimmered with neon reflections as he clutched a worn leather briefcase, a testament to battles fought on foreign soil and in the depths of his own heart. Every misstep's weight pressed down on him, yet amid the chaos of a society demanding accountability, a strange stirring of hope took root. Years of bearing loss and betrayal, each memory a haunting echo of the day Ranger fell and his trust in a corrupted system was shattered, had led him here. Under the relentless drizzle that washed grime from dim streetlights, Tobias resolved to face the consequences of his past, step by painful step. He walked into the courtroom with measured determination, his quiet armor forged from resilience and regret shielding him from the world's judgment. The prosecuting attorney's questions, once daggers to his soul, now served as a mirror reflecting the man he had become. In the tense silence of the jury room, his eyes met those of survivors and strangers alike. Each gaze a silent plea for justice, each stare a mutual acknowledgement of suffering and the desperate need for change. His testimony emerged as a raw, unfiltered confession of a life steeped in violence and loss, yet also as a declaration of responsibility and a promise of transformation. The once unyielding Delta Force commander had discovered that true strength was not measured by unchallenged power, but by the courage to admit faults and relentlessly pursue redemption. Outside the courthouse, the city exhaled a collective sigh. Newspaper headlines screamed of police corruption and systemic abuse, yet beneath the clamor, there pulsed an undercurrent of hope, a belief that the cycle of violence might finally be broken. Tobias navigated through throngs of protesters and supporters whose voices rose in unison, not with anger, but with a resolute call for change. Every step forward became an act of defiance against a system built on injustice. The road ahead remained uncertain, and the wounds of his past would not heal overnight. Yet each stride carried hard-won determination. Every scar told its story. Every tear had carved a lesson into his soul. He accepted that his journey was far from over. Redemption was not a destination, but a perpetual quest, forged in the fires of regret and tempered by hope. As the early morning mist enveloped him, Tobias paused beneath a flickering street lamp, its pale glow revealing steadfast resolve in his eyes. He whispered a promise to the empty air, a vow to honor those lost, to fight for justice, and to build a future defined by accountability and compassion. In that charged moment, past and future converged, and Tobias stepped into the unknown with courage as his sole ally, leaving behind a legacy of transformation that would echo in every heartbeat of the city. 3 days after Tobias Hale stood on those courthouse steps with a collar in his palm and the weight of a city on his shoulders, the world caught fire, but not the kind that burned buildings. This was digital, viral, unstoppable. A leaked courtroom video, grainy, real, and raw, showed Tobias turning down vengeance in front of the very officers who had torn his life apart. His voice cracked mid-sentence as he said, "I wanted blood. I trained for it. I lived in it. But I'm not giving them that part of me, not anymore." The internet exploded. News anchors dubbed him the Quiet Storm, former Delta Force, decorated, dangerous. But what gripped people wasn't his resume, it was his restraint. TikTok edits layered his speech over solemn piano chords. Threads and tweets praised him as the man who could have leveled a city, but instead chose to rebuild something far harder: trust. A hashtag trended for 3 days straight, #, justice without vengeance. But in real life, where no filters softened the pain, Tobias walked alone past the overgrown trail behind Ranger's favorite hill. The air still carried the scent of pine and wet bark. His hand brushed the collar in his jacket pocket. This was where Ranger had barked at squirrels, rolled in mud, and chased shadows like they mattered. And this is where Tobias finally knelt down, dug a small hole, and placed the collar inside with trembling fingers. No crowd, no cameras, just a man letting go. Behind him, footsteps. Nora, she didn't speak, just stood beside him, silent. Then reached out and took his hand. No fanfare, no forgiveness spoken aloud. But it was enough. Back in the city, the consequences had begun rippling. The police commissioner stepped down. Internal affairs reopened 8 cold cases. A community fund started in Ranger's name had already raised $400,000 for therapy dogs for trauma survivors. One act of restraint had detonated an empire of change. But the real lesson, the one people argued about in comment sections and family dinner tables, wasn't about war or peace, cops or criminals. It was about the choice. Because Tobias Hale had every right to rage, every skill to destroy, and every reason to let darkness win. But he didn't. And in that split-second decision, he reminded us all that real power isn't in what we can do. It's in what we choose not to. That restraint, when backed by strength, is a force more transformative than revenge could ever be. So if this story struck a nerve, if Tobias's journey from fury to purpose made you pause, then don't just scroll past. Let it sit with you. Share it. Talk about it. Debate it. Remember it. And hey, if you're hungry for more stories like this, where everyday moments collide with extraordinary choices and nothing is ever quite what it seems, then smash that like button, hit subscribe to the Xdaily Stories channel, and turn on your notifications. Because this is just the beginning. And trust us, the next story might just change the way you see the world.